Hello, and welcome to another webinar in our Level Up series. Today's topic is Industry or Custom Standards, What's Right for You? Presenting once again is Mark Gunlock, a Solution Architect at X-Rite Pantone. I'm Robert Grotans, the Global Technical Marketing Manager, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. If at any time during this webinar you have any questions, please feel free to use the questions form on this page to submit your question. We will do our best to follow up with you as soon as possible after this webinar. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark to get things started.
Great, thanks, Robert. So to start with, press control, the most fundamental part of press control is your solid ink densities. So density is controlled by changing the amount of ink that's transferred to the substrate. So we need to monitor that. But take a look at these three images. The densities are the same, but the appearances don't match. How can that possibly be? Well, if the ink colors or the TVI, known as dot gain, drift out of tolerance, the density is not going to tell you that the appearance is wrong. Density can be used to maintain a production run. However, you need to use the LAB values for make-ready and to diagnose color problems. The CMYK inks in these examples are very different. Images are made of tints, so TVI is going to have a big impact on those images, even if the solid ink densities are right on target. The two images on the right have the same solid ink densities, but they look very different because the TVI is different and all of their color is in the tints. So if we're going to target LAB values and TVI, where do we get our target numbers? There are several ISO standards for print related to the press room, inks, print viewing, and there's several others for color data exchange and PDF and a lot of things in the pre-press area. ISO 12647 and 15339 relate to the press room color target values. ISO standards are developed with contributions from regional groups around the world, and those groups then incorporate those new standards into their own specifications and methods. ISO 12647 has been used and updated for many years. It's a collection of print standards for offset, newsprint, gravure, screen, and FLEXO printing. There are no solid ink density target values. These standards include LAB values for paper, solid ink, and overprints, along with TVI tint curves for different print conditions. GRAVURE 2006 uses the target values, but it has its own G7 calibration instead of the published TVI curves. The resulting curves are usually within tolerance of the published TVI curves while providing improved gray balance. All this works well if the paper is in tolerance to the selected standard. In many cases, especially packaging, these standard conditions cannot be used. So test prints are performed and then calibration and fingerprint runs are done for custom conditions. A custom press ICC profile is made for the pre-press team. This profile is used for color separations and for proof simulation on inkjet proofers. It can be a challenge for pre-media to manage all the custom profiles for different suppliers. It can also be a challenge for suppliers to keep track of all of the different print target values for each pre-media company. Move the job or change any of the consumables and things can get messy. In worst cases, you may need to make a new fingerprint run and possibly re-separate the files. ISO 15339 was introduced to clean up this process. Instead of an endless number of custom press profiles, the concept was to have a series of 7 press profile gamuts that could be used with calibrations of G7 near neutral curves to match virtually any press condition. These gamut color spaces are based on what real printing presses can achieve. The CMYK aim points share a common hue angle through all the gamuts. Part 1 of ISO 15339 is how to do it. Part 2 is the target values you'll use. The press will run to one of the 7 characterized reference print conditions, or CRPCs. There's a standard method for making small adjustments to the target values relative to the actual paper or substrate that you're running. The plates are then G7 calibrated for that press running to that CRPC. Prepress can now use that same CRPC for their separations and proofs. A custom ICC profile may not be needed. If something changes, simply recalibrate the plates, but the press targets do not change. These are the characterized reference print conditions. These are based on some of the target values from 12647 for the different print conditions. GRAVURE 2013 and SWAP 2013 are updated from the 2006 versions with extremely small, virtually unnoticeable changes. If your substrate color is more than 3 delta E from the selected CRPC, then software is used to calculate substrate-corrected color aims. These are slightly adjusted CMYK and overprint target values that take into account the small changes that the paper would have on the ink. Gray balance target values are calculated to reduce the influence of the paper color from the highlights to the shadows. In this example of a paper with an LAB value of 95, 2, and -5, we can see that the values of the A and B are reduced, moving closer and closer to neutral, going from the paper color of 2 and -5 down to the 3/4 area where we're looking at much smaller numbers of 0.5 and -1.25. What we can see right here is the middle value, the middle gray, is half of the paper's value for A and B. So it has half of the paper color left. Plates are calibrated to achieve the gray balance targets when running to that CRP and that solid ink LAB value set that's included. The intent of these CRPCs is that if the same image is printed targeting each of the 7 CRPCs, then they will have a common color appearance. The range of color saturation and lightness may vary from one print condition to another, but the color hues are maintained as much as possible. This is especially useful when you have different kinds of packaging, such as labels, folding carton, shrink, etc., all coming together in the packaging and display of the product. It's acceptable to have variance in the lighting or the saturation by a little bit, as long as the hues are close. Just a little recap here. The press optimization fingerprinting involves a test run of the press to achieve stable solid ink values that are within tolerance of the largest CRPC that you can hit. You're going to use the substrate corrected color aim values if the paper is greater than 3 delta E from the standard. Then you're going to perform a G7 near neutral calibration for the plate curves based on your specific substrate color LAB. Now for the prepress, you won't need to make a custom ICC profile. Separations can be made from standard CRPC ICC profiles or adjusted profiles that include the SCCA values if needed. And proofing system can then use the same profile for its press simulations. Only on rare occasions for extremely color critical work, prepress may choose to make a custom ICC profile, but the print supplier will still target the CRPC. So how do you choose the standards? ISO 12647 works fine if you're running a standard substrate. G7 is optional. ISO 15339 requires G7 near-neutral calibration curves and provides better matching across a variety of printing conditions. Based on only 7 CRPCs with custom adaptation to the substrate as part of the standard methodology, it's easier to maintain and manage a group of targets as opposed to a large unlimited number of custom targets. Custom targets are being used less frequently now that we have the 15339. And the custom targets still require a lot more work to manage all those different targets across different suppliers. So that's all that I have today, and I'm going to turn it back over to Robert. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mark. So yeah, once again, thanks everyone for attending. If you do have any questions on what Mark just covered, feel free to drop us your question. I'll direct them to Mark and we'll get your response. So once again, thank you and have a great rest of your day.